Good morning. Today's session is brought to you by the letter C, and the word I've chosen is convergence. So what does that mean, and what's an example of that, right? I look out above the lights. I'm trying to see the ages of people in the audience. Some of you might remember these things that are on the screen, right? The first one, a phone. We used to use it to call and talk to people, have conversations. Sometimes we'd leave them messages, right? The other one, the computer. This is where we would go and do things, right? We'd run Excel, run different applications. We'd solve problems. Maybe we're more productive than we once were with pen and paper. Maybe we're not. But these two things had two different, completely different purposes that didn't come together, right? For those of you that didn't stay out really late last night, you know what the next slide is, right? What's coming is these things have converged, right? Our ability to look at voice communication, computing, it's all converged into the power in our hands, right? We don't have phones, we don't have computers, we have smart devices, right? The levels of computing power and other kinds of things that we have, the ways that we communicate, they've all converged into one device, right? Why do we even have a computer? Why do I have a phone? Why just have one thing, right? And the part when you think about this example, there's been other evolutions, right? As you bring computing to the power of the phone, you have these things called apps. I'm not embarrassed to admit I can remember I was one of the people, I was a pretty diehard BlackBerry guy, right? I'm not letting go of my keyboard. All I need is a browser. And this BlackBerry browser, this is good enough. I'll be able to do everything I ever want to do on this kind of thing. I will never need an app. Why would anybody need an app? And what will they do with an app? I mean, those words came out of my mouth, right? And of course, today, everything you do, right, in an app, everything that you brought, and it's kind of changed the world that we live in, and then it's changed how we treat consumers, how we treat financial services. Everything along those lines has changed. So let's bring this back to fraud and financial crime, right? So convergence, this idea of lots of things coming together, changing processes, changing the way we do things. Well, one area that's changing, right, and it may be for some of your institutions, something that, you're just starting the journey. We've seen other institutions that are further along. But in fraud and financial crime, we've started to see these organizations come together, right? We've seen fraud people, compliance people, sitting down, having conversations, talking about ways in which they can be sharing and leveraging technology. And part of the reason for that is because there's so much overlap in the types of transactions that are being monitored, and then the level of expense that's being done when it comes to FTEs and other aspects. So that level is converging. People are coming together. There's still organizational barriers that are in the way, but we think that the technology barrier is starting to break down. But kind of in the spirit of looking at those mobile devices and the way things have changed, there's another area that's converging within most financial institutions. And that is when you look at your fraud and financial crime strategy, you need individuals that are responsible for lots of, pardon the marketing folks, but these strange areas over in marketing, right? The customer experience people, the digital team, and other aspects. Sometimes in organizations we've seen the fraud guys and financial crime guys are the last to know about new things that we're offering consumers and different ways that we're offering to spend and transact money. And then we're often left chasing after it, trying to go catch up to the kinds of controls we need to put in place. So we see lots of these types of situations where all of these functions are kind of converging and helping influence an overall fraud and financial crime strategy, from people like head of payments all the way through people in charge of digital and customer experience. So as all of these individuals come together, what we look at it from a FICO perspective is we're looking at providing solutions and technology that really help you have a coordinated perspective of risk. How across your entire portfolio of financial products and services Can you really understand the levels of risk that you have in the organization, how you're looking at consumers? And that starts with simple things like the level of inflows, right? What money's coming in? What money's going out? But then also, more importantly, what are all the things that customers are doing along the way? Like just account maintenance, right? What am I calling in and asking questions about? What am I trying to do? Other aspects. Those are all important. And because those three kind of main categories, if you just kind of bucket it up at the 35,000 foot level, you also then have all these channels where all this stuff can happen, right? It can come in through, a branch visit. It could come in through an IVR. It could come in, maybe it's TJ and he's coming in through a browser instead of using the app, right? But all these kinds of things are now things that you need to coordinate to be able to develop this coordinated perspective of risk. And then finally, a layer of authentication. Almost at every touch point and step along the way, even if it's not present in front of the user, you need to be authenticating. And so when we look at this picture, this has kind of been our journey that we've been on now for quite a while to build out this framework, to be able to provide you with solutions and technology and analytics to help you do this. We also knew from FICO we needed to invest in certain areas. Several years ago, we invested in the acquisition of a company called Tonbeller to bring in the compliance expertise to FICO. And then just very recently, or just this morning, we announced the acquisition of a company called EasyMcom to bring in authentication capabilities. And so I just want to talk to you briefly about this and then also encourage you to go to the Solution Center to see more about it. But essentially, our authentication capabilities that are now part of the FICO portfolio cover three main areas. There's multi-factor authentication, there's biometric type authentication, and behavioral authentication. And all of those areas, if you were in yesterday's session with our CEO, Will Lansing, he was talking about how the behavioral aspect, how I behave, how I walk, how I talk, all my mannerisms and other kinds of things, that's really kind of the next frontier in a lot of the authentication capabilities, right? And now that's part of the FICO portfolio. And it's not just that, it's part of the FICO portfolio, but now you can integrate it as part of your overall strategies when you're looking at your fraud solutions and your financial crime solutions into an integrated perspective. Again, to pull in that coordinated level of risk or coordinated perspective of risk across your overall portfolio. The other aspect of that is something called ID proofing, and they've got some demos of this in the Solution Center. This is actually pretty cool stuff, right? Maybe if somebody would have showed me this early on, I would have seen the power of the app and all those kinds of things, right? But all these things that we've enabled our consumers, they don't want to come into a branch and show ID and go through this whole process and sit there for 45 minutes while people fill out apps, right? They want to be able to do this in a streamlined fashion using their handheld mobile device, AKA computing platform that they carry around in their pocket. So the capability to be able to look at IDs, verify the physical characteristics of those IDs, verify the liveness of me as a person, all that kind of activity becomes really powerful and important right there as part of your overall financial crime strategy. The other thing that we've asked ourselves is, how do we leverage all of you and the data that you have and that you've shared with FICO as part of our fraud solution portfolio? So we have data from over 9,000 financial institutions. We're always looking for ways that we can build better analytics and smarter artificial intelligence around that data. But the product that we've recently launched, Card Compromise Manager, takes all that data across a global basis, we process that in the cloud, and then we send back information about card compromises. Now, identifying card compromises and feeding that information out, it's really nothing that's that new. But what's really cool about this is we've made it all actionable. We've told you what to do or what our recommendation is to do about those compromises. Should you block cards? Should you reissue cards? Should you monitor cards? How do you seamlessly integrate that into your Falcon defenses, right? So all that capability out of one platform to get back to that coordinated perspective of risk. So let's just take a step back to our friends we have on the screen. And really one of the things that they look at, can we go back one, please? What they're asking themselves is, can you really afford to have rigid fraud and financial crime solutions that are inflexible as you're trying to cope with new payment mechanisms and other kinds of things that consumers are demanding? The answer, obviously is no, right? You need flexible platforms. And what you find is as payments evolve and the growth in real-time payments and other aspects, that limitations in the current systems hold things back, right? And so that's the other part that we at FICO are on a journey to help fix. So when you think about how I'm going to manage all that as I look at evolution of different payment types and different characteristics, I got to think about KYC aspects. I have to look at sanction screening. I've got my money laundering monitoring I need to do. We already talked about authentication that I need to pull in. I've got compromises that are happening. I've got to be able to detect fraud. I've got to monitor all these device profiles. I just got all this stuff. I got to get it to one place so that I can have this intelligent overall fraud strategy, right? And that's really the power behind what we're bringing out with something called Falcon X. Right? Falcon X is our next generation financial crime platform. It's built for the cloud. It's going to tick all the boxes that Klaus talked about yesterday. It's built for the cloud. It's built on the FICO platform. It leverages analytics, all those kinds of areas. But again, bringing all that stuff to one place to have that coordinated, centralized strategy. So we launched this about a little over a month ago at Finovate here in New York. And there's really kind of 4 key areas, right, about Falcon X. One is tremendous amount of flexibility, right? Now, I know it's pretty easy for a product guy to stand up here and say, hey, everything's going to be really flexible. But I'd encourage you to go look at some of the capabilities in the Solution Center. Essentially, the future of what you want to do with data and data that you want to ingest, it's limitless, right? It truly is limitless about all the kinds of things that you want to do. The other thing is we've brought in unification of operations. So as your organizations evolve with a fraud and compliance organization coming together, how do you leverage and unify the operations level? Still have some segregation of duties, but how do you have one technology stack in the cloud that's providing all of that capability? And then from an analytics perspective, there's something really cool that we've done called Instant ML, powered through a product that we, as part of Falcon X, is called Financial Crime Studio. This is a complete modeling framework. How do you wrangle data? How do you understand data? How do you test and challenge different models and different techniques? Bring all that together. And then we've also exposed this instant ML concept, which allows you to not just leverage open source technology to build models, but leverage FICO technology to build models. How we've built models for years, we're now putting in the hands of your data science team to be able to build their own models, use them in conjunction with FICO models, whatever aspects you want to do in your decisioning flow. And then finally, I mentioned all those different things. You got devices, you got other kinds of stuff. Everything that you want to look at and profile over time. We've essentially taken this level of profiling down to a nano level, right? Used to be I just want to profile TJ. But then I figured out, well, TJ interacts with me in different call centers. He uses different devices on those call centers. All these different kinds of aspects about TJ that I need to profile. Is that the same phone that somebody else is using? Is that the same computer somebody's using? All these aspects are things that are in your hands in a Falcon X framework to be able to pull all that stuff together.